Today, the Prime Minister to announce the first referendum in 20 years, asking Australians whether they support an Indigenous voice to Parliament.
I'm Dan Borsche here at the Garma Festival on the ancient lands of the Yolngu people, where anticipation is mounting ahead of that speech by the Prime Minister.
Russia and Ukraine accuse each other of an attack that killed dozens of prisoners of war in Donetsk.
Election results in Papua New Guinea to be delivered a week late in a delay that could be ruled unconstitutional.
A golden start to the Commonwealth Games. Australia dominates the pool on day one of competition.
And the hobby keeping aged care residents on the right track despite ongoing COVID restrictions.
Good morning. It is Saturday, the 30th of July. I'm Fawzia Ibrahim.
And I'm Joanna Nicholson. You're watching Weekend Breakfast. The Prime Minister is expected to unveil a draft question that Australians could be asked during a referendum to create an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Anthony Albanese will make his first significant address to Aboriginal communities at the Garma Festival in the Northern Territory's northeast Arnhem Land today.
Now, the government is not yet expected to set a date for the referendum, but it has previously indicated that it could be held as soon as next year. Let's cross now to Dan Borsche, who is at the Garma Festival for Weekend Breakfast. All right, Dan, in the last hour we talked about this buzz about the announcement from the Prime Minister. What exactly are we expecting from him?
Well, you're right, and a very good morning to you here from Gulkula, these ancient lands of the Yolngu people in Arnhem Land. There is a buzz here. There's a sense of expectation, but it must be noted, the last couple of people that I've had a yarn with have said that there's also a sense of we've been here before, we've had these type of conversations before that have led to no outcome. So there's a great sense of just holding on for a moment. The Prime Minister is set to speak today, where he's likely to outline next steps towards a referendum to enshrine a voice to Parliament. This comes, of course, after the Prime Minister, when winning the election on the 21st of May, said that this was central to his view of where we need to be going. Since then, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has repeatedly spoken about this being just about good manners, about creating a space to listen and hear First Nations leaders from these lands, from lands across the nation. So there's a direct connection point into politics. The challenge, of course, has been that Australians don't like to change the Constitution. There have been 44 attempts, just 8 of those have been successful. The most successful in Australian history was to count Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Australian citizens in 1967. And as we head towards the anniversary of that in May next year, there's this building sense of momentum that the Prime Minister has spoken about. So we are likely to hear today the question that would be put to the Australian population. Let's have a look at some of the detail there. That's that the question would be, or could be, if this wording were to be followed through, do you support an alteration to the Constitution that establishes an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice? Now, of course, the detail that would follow that, the Prime Minister is set to outline that there will be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and voice. This would be the first part of the wording that goes into the Constitution, followed by the Parliament shall, subject to, in fact, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice may make representations to Parliament and the Executive Government on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and also that the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have powers to make laws with respect to the composition, the functions, the powers, the procedures of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, that last part of the wording, so that there is not an issue that this is going to be a third chamber, as has been roundly dismissed and discredited by constitutional lawyers, academics, politicians and the like. Of course, the challenge here is, well, there are a number of challenges, bringing all Australians together, because this is something that needs to be supported by a majority of people in a majority of states. That includes Australia Australians from all walks of life being brought along in this journey. There is also a challenge about the date. When would that be? Also, what about the detail of the model of how that would look? Does that come before a referendum, or should that be put after such a referendum so that the politicians, the parliament, has an opportunity to define what that looks like? There is, of course, opposition to this as well. Jacinta Price, a new CLP senator for the Northern Territory, is on her way to Garma right now. She said that she's worried that this proposal, that the model would lack the kind of detail that would make tangible change. That what is this going to mean if you have children that are not going to school in a remote community, if this is trying to deal with domestic violence, around health inequality? Is it going to have any of those impacts? Well, she's going to be here having this conversation later on today, and of course on the Q&A program on the ABC as well. And this is all part of that big conversation of hearing lots of different voices and perspectives and bringing those into that conversation. One that we're going to see pushed to the next level today, and then the follow-up will of course be the reaction to that speech from the Prime Minister.
We will be crossing back to you during the course of the morning to find out the latest from the Garma Festival there at Arnhem Land. Dan Borscher there, thank you.
Well, let's turn to other news now. Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of a rocket attack that has killed 40 Ukrainian prisoners of war. Kyiv claims the strike in the occupied part of Donetsk was an attempt to destroy evidence of torture and killing. Moscow has refuted the assertions and says the prison camp was targeted by Ukrainian precision missiles.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's president says his country is ready to begin international shipments of grain for the first time since the Russian invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky made the announcement during an unexpected visit to the port of Odessa. His visit comes a week after Kyiv and Moscow agreed to a 120-day deal to resume grain exports.
The first vessel, the first ship, is being loaded since the beginning of the war. This is a Turkish ship, and I'm standing in its background. This indicates that the port has started working. The most important thing for us is that the port and people work.
At least 16 people have been killed in flash flooding in the US state of Kentucky. Days of torrential rainfall has inundated homes, washed out roads and caused rivers and streams to overflow in the southern state. Authorities have warned that the death toll could climb.
Victims of a powerful earthquake in the northern Philippines are calling for help, with residents pleading for food and shelter. At least 6 people died and another 270 were injured in the magnitude 7.1 quake. Many buildings were damaged or destroyed and a number of towns have been completely cut off. One resident says food is running out.
They are already asking us to leave soon because they cannot feed us and are running out of rations. For us residents who have lost our homes, we are asking for help. Anyone who can, in their hearts, help people like us who have no homes to return to.
Truck drivers from across New South Wales will gather at Federal Parliament in Canberra today to campaign for better working conditions. The Transport Workers Union says a tribunal is needed to set standards for drivers and improve road safety. It says drivers are being pressured to work long hours without rest, contributing to around 1,000 deaths in 6 years.
The Tasmanian Liberal government says Rebecca White should resign as the state Labor leader after the ALP's national executive intervened in the state branch. 2 former senators will run the Tasmanian branch until after the next state election in an effort to stop internal factional conflict. Rebecca White has said she won't be stepping down.
Oh, wow!
US actor Will Smith has apologised to comedian Chris Rock for slapping him at the Oscars earlier this year. Smith said the comedian wasn't ready to talk to him in a video posted on social media. Smith says there was no excuse for his actions after Chris Rock made a joke about the appearance of Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith.
So I will say to you, Chris, I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable, and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk.
Colombian singer Shakira has been threatened with an 8-year prison sentence for tax fraud. Spanish authorities accuse her of failing to pay the equivalent of $20.5 million between 2012 and 2014. During that time, she presented the American television series The Voice, as well as earning money from record sales.
And a gym in Abu Dhabi has taken on a new type of client, taking dog walking to a new level. These pups are perfecting their stride, hitting treadmills specifically designed for canine bodies. During the country's scorching summers, it allows these hot dogs to keep cool. Next, we'll be having dogs doing aerobics classes or something. Cycling classes, they're probably not up for cycling
Dogs
classes.
doing Pilates.
Yeah,
dogs
yeah.
They already
Yoga
have.
dogs.
They already have yoga dogs. Downward dog.
Yes.
It's time now to talk sport with Jared Coote.
Come to me with the good stuff
Yeah,
all
well,
the
there
time.
you go.
What a money grab that is, anyway. Ridiculous.
Why aren't you covering dog sports as well? Because
Yeah, I know.
it's huge.
Because,
Yeah.
well, it looks like it, but we like to cover real sport here. So,
All right, talking about real sports.
I take it back to all the people that have got a thing for dog sport. If you think's dog sport, take a look in the mirror. Anyway,
Well, let's talk about serious sport. Let's talk about how serious the Australians are at the Commonwealth Games.
They are very serious. They've all been training on treadmills, no doubt, in the build-up to the Games. But 8 gold medals in the end, 5 of these in the pool for the Australian swim team. What an opening day it was. There was only 2 gold medals up for grabs that they didn't win on this opening day. You see there Elijah Winnington. He came first in the 400-metre men's freestyle. It was a clean sweep for the Aussies. First, second, third. Short in second. Mac Horton, everyone's familiar with, of course, in third position. The women's 200-metre freestyle, Ariane Titmus with gold. Molly O'Callaghan was second, just missing out to Titmus. It was very, very close. The youngster might upstage her at the next Olympics. We'll have to wait and see. Maddie Wilson in third. Zach Stubblety-Cook won gold in the 200-metre breaststroke. He's the Olympic champion, the world record holder, and now the Commonwealth Games champion. Tim Hodge won the 100-metre backstroke S9 class as well. And then the mixed 4x100-metre relay team, no surprise really, they ended up winning gold as well, just missing out on a world record.
Not a bad start, though. All right, what happened in the AFL last night?
Yeah, so Melbourne, they beat Fremantle to move up to equal first place on the ladder. They won pretty comfortably in the end by 46 points at Perth Stadium. The Demons kicked 12 goals to 5 for their 14th win of the season. Jack Viney, a bit of a standout, 33 disposals for him, 4 clearances in the end. So, yeah, the Demons level with Geelong now at the top of the ladder on 56 competition points, but the Cats, of course, with a game to come this weekend. And we'll have plenty more Commonwealth Games coming up later on in the hour. Also, we'll be showing the NRL as well. The Panthers with just their second loss of the season for a very specific reason, mainly with Nathan Cleary being sent off, their star halfback. So we'll have all that coming up later on.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jared.
Thank you. Let's check the weather in the capitals for you now. Mostly sunny in Brisbane and in Sydney. Clear skies for Canberra and Melbourne. A brisk day in Hobart. Late showers for Adelaide. Rainy in Perth, reaching 31 degrees in Darwin.
Right, we are heading back to the Garma Festival in Arnhem Land, where Dan Borsche is back with us. Good morning again to you, Dan. And it looks just like such a beautiful scene behind you, this gathering of so many interesting people from all walks of life. Of course, we spoke earlier about that big news around the constitutional reform, but what else is going on there at the Garma Festival?
Good morning again. You're right. There is such a sense of buzz here, people coming together from all different Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nation groups across the country, but also from all walks of life. There was just someone, one of Australia's most senior business leaders walked past me, and then one of the youth leaders who's been running the dialogues around the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So there's a whole lot of mix of all sorts of people. You're right. The big discussion is, of course, around constitutional recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, that enabling legislation that we've talked about that would lead to recognition in our founding document and then create a pathway for there to be a voice to Parliament. But this festival is about so much more than one single issue. And we heard Denise Bowden, the CEO, speaking a little earlier. She was talking about this being the place where the salt water meets the fresh water, a metaphor, if you will, for all parts of Australia, people from all different walks of of life coming together here to have big conversations. You can probably hear a bit of the music off to my side. There's a campfire behind me where people are just sitting and having a yarn and talking about all sorts of things. That can be about the really great stuff that's happening, the sense of optimism around change and development in our country, but also invariably about some of the big challenges. As we talk about, we know there are big issues around education, about, in this area, in the Northern Territory, a debate right now about alcohol in remote communities. The Productivity Commission this week said all but 4 of the 17 Closing the Gap targets are going backwards. So there are big challenges. Those that are gathering here, you get the sense that they don't see those as insurmountable, but just needing more input from the community for those solutions to be driven by those on the ground.
I think one of the many beautiful things about the Garma Festival is that blending of culture, which we saw certainly on display yesterday, but also storytelling and that intellectual debate and discussion about really important issues.
Yeah, my word, it's all of those things and more, isn't it? Yesterday, you're referring to the arrival of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese with that very sacred dance by the Gumatj dancers, where that was about welcoming him, about setting the parameters of this discussion, of creating a space to have this conversation. And of course, that's what we've seen very much so at the Bungal, which is the sacred dance ground, the ceremonial site, not far from where I'm standing right now. It's also about storytelling and singing, because we have to remember that throughout Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture wasn't written down. It wasn't documented in books to gather dust on bookcases. It was through dance, it was through singing, through performance and storytelling. It was doing what's happening behind me, people sitting around yarning, sharing life's experiences. It's about those big discussions as well. There's a youth forum here where there are more than 80 children gathering, where they're talking about issues from their perspective. So there's a whole lot going on. There are more than 2,000 people that have gathered here for this long weekend in the Northern Territory. And you just get a sense that after the really tough couple of years we've had, that we're not through yet, we still have a ways to go, that this is one of those first times to come back together in a way, to have big conversations, to celebrate, to just also have a yarn.
And this is a unique year for the Garma Festival of coming together, a true coming together after 2 years of COVID and not having the festival held in person.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why the National Critical Care and Trauma Response Centre is here. They've been partnering with the Yothu Yindi Foundation, working together to ensure that everyone's health, safety and well-being are paramount. There are protocols in place here that we've all become used to. Physical distancing where possible, hand sanitizers, some people wearing masks. Most of this is outdoors. The weather here, you noted at the start, is glorious. I tell you what, I'm feeling for my colleagues, friends and family in Canberra this morning, where I think it's about -5. It must be about 19, 20 degrees here right now. And there is just that buzz, that sense of anticipation, of excitement and of reconnecting, because that's been one of the really tough parts of the last couple of years, hasn't it? That we haven't been able to connect, to be in the same space, because for all the reasons that everyone knows. But this is where we come back together and we start to reconnect.
Dan, there must be, as you said, there's a sense of anticipation, but there also must be the excitement and the apprehension, given what we've seen come out from past years as well, some disappointment.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. And that's when I talked earlier about that apprehension. It's because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders have been told before that change is coming. We had that when there were calls for a treaty, for recognition that no children should be living in poverty, the Redfern statement, the Yirrkala Bark petition that's in Parliament now. This is successively over decades there have been these calls for action, for change, to be heard and to be listened to. And that's what the Uluru Statement from the Heart, in its simplicity, it is incredibly complex in that it calls for that deep, deep listening, a voice, Makarrata truth, a voice to Parliament, a Makarrata commission of coming together to make resolutions after there have been difficulties, and truth-telling, which is the very business that we're in, about storytelling. That's what's happening right here. That Uluru Statement from the Heart is an invitation, is what the elders say, an invitation to the nation to walk together. After the Prime Minister's speech today, where we're likely to see that detail of wording that could go to Australian voters, and the wording that would go into the Constitution, would of course mean that there's another conversation that needs to take place about where to from here. How do we get to that point where we have that vote? How do we create as a nation that space where everyone is invited and has the opportunity to participate if they want to? And then what does that mean going forward? A co-design process perhaps about next steps. So there are big challenges, there are big opportunities. We are in a different world now. We haven't had a referendum in Australia with social media, with trust so dissolved in politics, in governance, in leadership. We also haven't had a referendum with social media. What sort of impact, push and pull factors is that going to have as well? These are all discussions that are starting to unfold now and are very much going to be at front of mind in the weeks and months ahead.
Dan Borscher there in beautiful Arnhem Land. Thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll speak to you later on in the morning.